Good morning, Colorado. You are listening to the Daily Sun Up. It's a conversation with the Colorado Sun. I'm team editor David Krause. Before we jump into today's conversation, here is a quick message from our sponsor.
When your number one fan is your number one threat. Stephen King's iconic thriller Misery is live on stage at the Arvada Center this fall. Tickets are on sale today. Running September 4th through October 11th, visit arvadacenter.org for tickets today. Set the summer trend. Electrify your lawn equipment and help reduce harmful ground-level ozone in your Front Range community. Learn more at simplestepsbetterair.org.
Now, back to the show.
Greetings, listeners, and welcome to our Friday conversation with Colorado authors. I'm Kevin Simpson, editor of the Colorado Sun's Sunlit feature, and today I'm joined by Ian Patterson, who has published a provocative new work of speculative fiction called Fruits of Our Labor. Thanks for joining us, Ian.
Thanks for having me, Kevin.
So I love speculative fiction for the way it presents the reader with a compelling what if, and then explores the ramifications. So first of all, tell us what parthenogenetic birth or parthenogenesis is, and then how it lays the foundation for Fruits of Our Labor.
So parthenogenesis is a method of asexual reproduction. It's never been found in mammals, but it is found in new species all the time. And usually it occurs during extreme stress events. So if mates can't be found for whatever reason, lizard populations are one area where you see this. They'll start to reproduce asexually. And there are drawbacks to this, of course. So all of the hallmark issues with low gene pool come in. You get birth defects, you get mutations, all that sort of stuff. And Fruits of Our Labor revolves around a speculative fiction idea of what would happen if that occurred with human beings. So it's a story of radical equality set in near future America, where women become capable in mass of parthenogenetic birth, and men are no longer needed for the continuation of the species. It's a story about a profound transformation that asks who gets to have autonomy, who gets to write the future, and who that future is for.
So there's a story behind how this idea came to you, and it involves a podcast. Everything does, right? and then listening to possibly too much political rhetoric in an election season, which we've all done. So give us sort of the philosophical backstory to the narrative here.
Sure. So as my wife and I are watching the 2024 election cycle play out, and I'm listening to this kind of ramping rhetoric, especially from the far right, this resurgence of pretty crazy misogyny coming out. And we're reading about Project 2025 and all of this stuff happening. I'm listening to a podcast and cooking in the kitchen, which is something I love to do. And it's this podcast called Unexplainable, which I'm a big fan of because it helps me have wonder for the world. It helps me look at things that are not explained in a new light. And especially when writing, science fiction, speculative fiction, it helps me kind of reframe things. And so they're talking about parthenogenesis. And I think the quote in there is, new species are found all the time that are capable of parthenogenetic birth. And I turned to my wife with just a huge grin. And I was like, hey, what if this happened to humans? And so really the story was birthed from there. And I had this idea of using protest slogans and protest art that are happening today or have historic importance in a way to talk about bodily autonomy and reproductive freedom in a new context, in sort of this speculative fiction world.
So once we get past the idea that parthenogenesis can happen in humans, sort of suspend our disbelief or whatever. Once we get past that, tell us how you explore the issue, because you've got multiple points of view going here, and you're covering a span of about half a century.
So I wanted to capture the real depth of change that could happen with a major societal shift like this. So it's told through three interwoven perspectives. There's a woman living through the early backlash to PG birth, a child born into the first major PG generation, and kind of a future historian looking back on it. And then interspersed throughout are these pseudo scientific articles or excerpts from encyclopedias that kind of bleed present day fact with future fiction to create, my hope was, a seamless transition between the two.
Mm-hmm. So that's interesting that you take something like parthenogenesis, which is maybe just beyond believability. How do you know if it's something that, that's, we're jumping the shark here, or if this is, okay, we're in that sweet spot where, no, it couldn't really happen, but maybe.
Yeah, that is a great question. And, one of the responses I got really early to this book, I should say one of my frequent beta readers is someone who actually really does not like speculative fiction.
Oh.
So she really only reads realist fiction. And so she read this work and asked me, why didn't I imagine this as something like in vitro fertilization expanding in capability, which is a really near future possibility? And I actually love the mode, when I know that speculative fiction is doing it right, it's because it encourages people to think like that. Because it makes them think like, well, this is obviously, not going to happen. But how could it happen in reality? And as soon as people start thinking that, they're open to that sort of empathetic change that speculative fiction can do.
Well, of course, we've got an excerpt from Fruits of Our Labor coming up on Sunday in our Sunlit feature at coloradosun.com, along with an author Q&A where you can learn more about Ian. And the excerpt is from the beginning of the book, and it paints a picture of, appropriately enough, a massive, I'll say Supreme Court, but the future equivalent of a Supreme Court decision on the legality of parthenogenetic birth. How did you settle on this particular vehicle to begin the narrative? Because it really effectively paints a picture of a near future society, but it also has these echoes, very strong echoes of the present day, almost literally.
Yeah, absolutely. And there was so much from the present day that I was pulling from. I really wanted to talk about this current moment in American politics. And really, what went into the writing of this was the repeal of Roe v. Wade in 2022. My daughter was born in 2023. And, as we're watching this election cycle in 2024, all I can really think about is the future that she's going to have, that she's going to grow up into. And so, of course, I wanted to write this book to reflect on and critique the current moment because I want a better future for her.
So you mentioned in our author Q&A that Fruits of Our Labor is largely a hopeful book. Yeah. Hopeful in what way?
So I would say that the ending is a very hopeful ending. Sorry, I have a cat jumping on me here. In that it imagines a more equitable future than we have today. So this is a book that I even pitched as a hopeful mirror to Naomi Alderman's Power, which, if you're familiar with it, women gain power over men and their power corrupts them in really horrifically negative ways. And so I wanted to write a mirror to that where this sort of matriarchal society is born. And not only the matriarchy, but like a true equality happens, with the hope that if we can dream things like this, we can make them a reality.
So I also want to mention your previous book, Transference, that also riffs on a great what if. In that case, it was what if people could, for a price, assume the diseases and conditions of others. Really fascinating stuff. We featured that book almost exactly a year ago, and it was terrific. I don't know, speculative fiction. I guess it's technically a genre, is it?
Mhm.
Yeah. Okay. So tell us how you conceive of what you call these theme-forward books, and more specifically, why that form sort of stirs your creativity.
I guess I grew up reading older science fiction that was very much in the vein of thought experiment. You look at Ursula K. Le Guin and works like The Left Hand of Darkness, where she challenged the gender binary in 1969. And I have always loved the presence of theme in books because I think it's the glue that makes a book stand the test of time. So it makes them memorable. It's the thing that actually pushes people to change in their understanding of it. And so I've always strived to write really theme forward books. And to the extent that I am a somewhat didactic writer, and I would say like I am trying to say something. And I do try to be somewhat fearless in that. And a lot of my writing comes from imagining one small change in the world and then following the thread through. So for transference, just like you said, I was imagining what would happen if we could transfer diseases. And I wanted to write this critique of capitalism and these structures that sort of use people up. And it fell into place really naturally. And for Fruits of Our Labor, a very similar thing. I wanted to talk about bodily autonomy, about reproductive freedom, and parthenogenesis gave me a really good starting off point for that.
So, as a practical matter, when you've got your theme, you also have a plot, a narrative. How do you as you're crafting a novel here? How do you approach it? Do you start with the theme and then build the plot around that, or do you have an idea for a plot and the theme kind of seamlessly fits into it?
I would say the theme is what brings me to the plot typically. I'm probably a character third writer, although it would depend on the book. That's not always the case. And what I mean by that, and my general practice of writing these pieces, is I'll start out with sort of a test piece. So somewhere in those books is a scene or a moment or an idea that I explore in 500 to 1,000 words. And I'm trying to really get a feel for how the story might play out or who the characters are. And if that presence of theme speaks to me in a meaningful way. And so for Fruits of Our Labor, there is specifically one of the scientific articles that I wrote. I was up at midnight. I couldn't sleep. I was thinking about this book. And so I wrote this scientific article about parthenogenesis, imagining this future state where human beings were capable of it. And in that article, there were all the themes I wanted to talk about in the book. So I would say it happens somewhat organically. I'm a very organic writer. I don't plot specifically very much. I'll normally, after that point, write a one-page summary of like, this is where I think the book will go.
So ultimately, was your goal with Fruits of Our Labor, and I think you kind of alluded to this earlier, was it to trigger conversation? Because that seems like a tall order in our current political environment, unfortunately.
It does seem like a tall order, and that was absolutely my goal. I want to stir community discussions. I want this book to wind up in book clubs. And I don't see myself as separate from that either. There's a pretty prolonged author's note at the start of this book where I recognize that I'm writing outside of my lived experience, quite a ways removed from it. And I'm trying to do that empathetically, but also recognizing that I won't get everything right. And so the story of this book launching, I hope, is also one of personal growth for myself. And I hope in the ability of using this book as a leaping off point, it allows communities to have discussions that are tricky, honestly, to have in today's day and age.
So you talked about the structural challenges of a book that has 3 points of view and it spans 50 years and has these made up scientific articles. It's a lot to keep straight. Tell us a little bit just about your process.
Sure. So in the book, not only are we jumping between timelines that span 50 years, these scientific articles that are interspersed throughout there have made up references that also are dated. And all of these events that I'm imagining, including blending with historical events, it all had to make sense in a timeline. And like I said, I don't plot very much on my books. So my initial draft of this was pretty good, but there were definitely several instances where it's like, oh, I have these things happening after each other and actually they need to be reversed. And that's a major impediment to what I've said in the story. And so it was a really great book to land with Shiraki Press. They're a Hope Punk Press. And Brianne at Shiraki helped go through and write the timeline with me. And we actually went through every listed date that's in the novel and pulled out what's happening in succession to make sure it made sense. And that was one of the bigger areas that had to be rewritten.
Well, finally, Ian, tell us about what you got coming next. It sounds like a couple things percolating out there.
I am always working. So I just quit my job and I'm writing full time for the foreseeable future.
Really?
Just at least for the next few months. And that'll give me some space to really get these projects moved forward, which I'm super excited about. So I'm going to continue to thread the needle between self-publishing and traditional publishing. On the self-publishing side, I have a new dystopian science fiction book called The Cog That Spins the Wheel. That's coming early next year. It looks at a world filled with deadly action sports and kind of guided by the hand of hypercapitalism set on planets across the galaxy. It also deals with what it's like to live through a catastrophic injury. And I think we talked about this last time, but I'm an action sport athlete. That's the other thing I do. And I've been injured any number of times. So it's also a very personal book for me. But I've described that as a mashup between Ursula K. Le Guin's The Dispossessed and the movie Rollerball.
Right, James Caan, yeah.
Yeah, two pretty big different themes there, but I think they fit together really well. And then on the traditional publishing side, I'm currently writing my first novel-length horror novel. So I write horror mainly in short stories at this point. But I've had this idea for about 15 years now of writing a very literary-leaning surrealist horror novel set in the United States. It's a reimagining of a classic novel, but I don't want to give away too much there.
Sure.
I'm ready to query. But if any agents listen to this and they're interested, let's reach out.
All right, that sounds pretty exciting. Well, we've been talking with Ian Patterson, the Colorado author of Fruits of Our Labor. Be sure to catch the excerpt coming up Sunday in our Sunlit feature at coloradosun.com. Thanks for joining us, Ian.
Thanks, Kevin.
And thank you, listeners, for making the Daily Sun Up part of your day. Have a great weekend.
Thanks for listening. And finally, here are a few stories that you should know about today.
A trio of union members at the Cargill meatpacking facility in Fort Morgan are organizing a revote on the contract proposal that was rejected earlier this month. The group thinks some members didn't understand what they were voting for and say they are facing a language barrier. There are 26 dialects spoken among the 1,700 Teamsters. Denver Water typically does not engage in politics, but it's throwing its support behind a proposed statewide ballot measure to fund watershed and wildfire mitigation work. The proposition would take $175 million annually from taxes collected on outdoor gear sales to help fight wildfires, reduce risk of additional blazes, and restore mountain watersheds damaged by fire. Colorado residents have another chance at 2,800 e-bike vouchers worth $1,000. Starting August 24th, state energy officials are reviving a popular discount program that used up all the available money during its first run from 2023 to 2025. Colorado has about $3 million to spend on the new vouchers.
To read these stories and much more, visit our website, coloradosun.com. As an award-winning nonprofit news outlet, we take our mission of credible, independent journalism seriously, and you can check out our trust indicators at coloradosun.com/ethics. Our music is by the Denver-based Matt Skellinger Group. A link to their music is in our show notes, and a special thanks to Swallow Hill Music. I'm David Krause. See you next time.